everybody, and welcome to the Fabled Upkeep. I'm your host, Freddie, joined by my co-host, Neal,
Hey, how are you?
and our co-host, Jared.
Hey, friends.
And today we're bringing y'all a new deck brew that we have been working on, which is Orvar, the All-Form. And Jared, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with a little bit about this commander?
Yeah, Orvar is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 shapeshifter as Changeling. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. Last ability is when a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent. So pretty much we're ignoring that last line of text. My deck personally ignores the first line of the Changeling. Really, what we're concerned about is whenever you cast that instant or sorcery spell, targeting one of your other permanents, you create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. So in this deck, there's 3 primary cards that you want to try and get at least one of in a game in order to get this engine going. Those cards are Clock Spinning, Mind Games, and Whim of Volrath. So all 3 of these cards are instants with buyback. So you can cast them over and over again, and they can target any one of your own permanents pretty much in any case. Even though Clock Spinning says that it can add or remove counters, or Whim of Volrath, says that it changes text on something, you actually don't have to do those effects to target the permanent in the first place, which allows them to work really well with Orvar. So you want to get one of those 3 cards, and then you want to have cost reducers like Sapphire, Medallion, or Baral, Chief of Compliance, because they work with buyback because it's part of the cost as you cast the spell. So you get those cost reducers to work, and you're going to copy things like your own islands. You could copy your mana rocks. You could also copy things like Isochron Scepter, so you can keep putting more instants under different Isochron Scepters to continue to gain value. One of the ways that you can do an infinite combo is if you target Cloud of Fairies with some of these cost reducers, you can basically just infinitely untap your lands and then create the infinite 1/1 flyers. And so that's pretty cool. Some of the more combat ways that you could take the deck, you could target things like Master of Waves over and over again, or Agent of Treachery to like steal permanents. And so that's really cool. And so my deck, you could go kind of with either direction as both the combo. You could also win through the combat. How about you guys?
Yeah, that sounds like a very spicy deck. I know you and I had a fun time playing together with these. Orvar versus, what was it? Anya and Zancha, sorry. And Kenrith, I believe. That was a good game. So my deck, I took it a little bit more combat focused, though I do have a few combos in the deck as well. Couple of the key targets that I want to point out, just since you already went over all the spells that or what you're trying to do with Orvar and copying. I just wanted to point out a couple of key targets for the copy effect. And in my deck, I picked a Loyal Drake. So this one's a 2/2 flyer for 3 lieutenant at the beginning of combat on your turn. If you control your commander, draw a card. So that's a great way to just continuously multiply and draw a bunch of cards on combat. Amphibian Mutineer to get that exile effect on the board and control the board, which is great. Keeper Keys to make stuff unblockable and to get the Monarch to get extra card draw. I did like what you said about stealing permanents and or creatures, and I put Sorrow of Temptation in my deck. That's a great little one to just continuously copy and steal everybody's stuff. But the MVP for me, and I was able to do it once, and I really love this card. And when I saw Orvar, I thought of this card, which was Brood Birth Viper. It is 4 and a blue, 3/3 with Myriad. Whenever Brood Birth Viper deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. So if you're copying it, you're getting 3 attacks or 3 copies of it. No, 2 other copies of it on top of the other copies that it gets out of control. You need a math or a calculator to figure it out. It's quite lovely. But a couple of the win cons in my deck, I went for Tidesbow Tyrant and Thassa's Oracle. There's definitely plenty of ways to go infinite card draw in the deck. And one card that I'm surprised you didn't point out, Jared, was Coveted Jewel. The 6 CMC artifact that says when Coveted Jewel enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards and tap to add 3 mana of any one color. being able to copy this and drawing 3 cards and continuously looping that over and over is definitely quite interesting. I did
Yeah,
not in
yeah,
my
that is a nice one with Whim of Volrath, especially since it's 3 to cast it and buy it back. So if you can get out that artifact, and you can continuously do that. But I don't have that in my build just because it's kind of expensive at 6 mana. That's the only reason I didn't include it. But that's definitely another way you could take the deck. Sure.
Yeah, I kind of tried to power mine down, even though I did point out Tidespout Tyrant and Thassa's Oracle as win cons, but I definitely wanted to keep it a little bit more, I guess, quote unquote, fair. I could definitely see you swapping a few things out of my deck and definitely pumping up the power up quite a bit. But I also didn't run any of the buyback cards for that reason as well. I did, however, run things like Archaeomancer and Snapcaster Mage to be able to bring stuff back from my graveyard and recur them. And also, where are you? There's the Seagate Oracle as well, which is great in the deck. And Torrential Gearhorn, can't forget him. Anything that lets me bring spells back or gain flashback or be able to play them out of the graveyard, that's how I had my recursion in my deck. What about you, Neal?
So I definitely in my version of Orvar, the most fair for sure. I definitely cracked it. I gave myself, okay, how can I build this in the most Neal of Neal ways? And I did it. So I focused on one of my favorite things is Changeling, right? I focused, there's quite a few actual Changelings within the mono blue realm. I put every single one that I could possibly think of inside my deck. And what I wanted to do was really kind of, I took some key things from an oldie, a Misform Ultimus. So Misform Ultimus is kind of what a changeling type commander, right? It's a 3 and a blue, is basically a 3/3, and it has Misform Ultimus as every creature type, right? So a lot of people used to use this, and if they wanted to play mono blue, changeling type deck. So that's what I focused on here with Orvar to kind of make him a little bit more fair, because he, as both of you guys have talked about, it's extremely easy to really take Orvar to that next level, right? So I leaned on stuff like all the different changeling. You got Moth Dust Changeling and Universal Automaton, Shapesharer, Turtle Shell Changeling were a couple. And so with every creature type, well, I really wanted to kind of use a lot of the cool lords, right? And blue actually has quite a few lords that are not only cheap in mana value, but they also provide a pretty cool little bit of extra things, like Lord of Atlantis, for instance. Everybody knows the 2 blue Summon Lord. It's all merfolk get +1/+1 and gain Island Walk. Really old card. It's really neat. I also went with Supreme Phantom. Since we're playing Changeling and we're all creature types, other spirits I control get +1/+1. Threw in like Grand Architect. Basically, any lord that I could find that kind of provided that either a +1/+1 theme, or I even did stuff like Shifting Sliver. Like slivers can't be blocked except by slivers. You probably won't run into any other slivers. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. Slivers are probably more popular than ever right now, but most games you should probably be able to get through no problem. One card that I really found was extremely, extremely powerful was a Docent of Perfection. It's 3 and 2 blue. It's flying. It's an insect horror. And it's a 5/4, and it says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you put a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token onto the battlefield. And then if you control 3 or more wizards, you basically transform it. And one thing about the Docent is it's extremely simplistic to flip him over, because if you have a few of your other changelings and even Orvar out, you can definitely flip Docent, and he basically gives +2/+1 to wizards whenever you flip him over. So he can really buff your changelings up really quickly. So that's kind of how I took my deck. I've played it a few times. It's really fun. I used a lot of the cards that, you've already kind of talked about. One thing that I really wanted to be cognizant of in my version was I try to pick cards that definitely replace themselves. So, for instance, Leap, which is a one blue. It's basically an instant. It allows you to target a creature and give it flying until end of turn, but it allows you to draw a card. So one thing I've noticed about watching other people who've played Orvar, the buyback is really nice, right? People tend to put that one, and then the one I forget which one you called it, the whim. Whim.
Oh, Winds of Volrath?
Yeah, whim. That's a super popular one. I didn't put that in mine. Because it definitely leads to a combo, and I'm just not a combo type of player. But I did try to kind of pick cards that definitely, as much as I could, kind of replace themselves. And then I also tried to pick cards that not only just targeted creatures, but you want to be able to target numerous types of permanents, right? There's artifacts that you're probably going to want to target with Orvar or lands. Obviously, I decided to go down the Glimmer Post, which is the land locust. Probably not very many people play with this one. It was an old during Mirrodin, right? Basically, whenever Glimmer Post comes into the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each locust on the battlefield. Well, I put a couple cards that kind of target lands, and I'm just make a few copies of Glimmer Post. It doesn't do anything crazy, but it does kind of provide a little bit of life gain. Basically, if you get further into the game and somebody's really ticking that life down on you, you can kind of use this to your advantage. So that was kind of the way I went. And then one other thing that I decided to go with was basically an old card that you sometimes see it played in Kenrith. I've always wanted to kind of mess around with it, but Dismissing a Dream. It's a 6 and a blue. It's an enchantment. Each creature your opponents control is an illusion in addition to its other types. And basically, whenever this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability, you sacrifice it. So I kind of tried to put cards in my deck that allowed me to target other people's creatures so I can kind of, blue is okay with removal. This kind of provides that additional oomph into my version of the deck. So it was kind of a fun little card that I like to play. But that's how I went. I just did the kind of the misform Ultimus type of deck, and I really tried to focus the Orvar in that Changeling ability and take advantage of every creature type. So it was pretty cool. It plays really. It's a real fun one.
So you remember how you said that I had the most creative deck last video? Yeah, you take the cake on this one, my friend. This is pretty freaking awesome. Who would have thought that you could get an Orvar deck into low and have such a good time? I want to.
It was tough. It was definitely tough because you have to be, because it's so simple to. I mean, it's like Jared said, and I think you said it too, Freddie, is that Orvar is so powerful. It doesn't take much for him to just kind of completely go bonkers, right? So, it was kind of tough. I had to be very, very cognizant of which cards I were picking because, man, you could really, who wouldn't want to do Isochron Scepter and all that kind of stuff? I mean, that's fun, right? Like that sounds like so much fun. I just, you had to kind of pay attention to what you were putting in there. So it's challenging to tone down a deck, right? It's really simple to go up in value and in power for sure.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you, I played I think total of 4 games with the deck so far, and it's got a 50% win ratio out of the 4. And both the games that I won were kind of like one of those like eureka moments, like, oh wait, I actually have a combo going. Oh wow, oh sorry guys, I win the game, and I didn't even realize it was gonna happen. But this deck, this guy or Orvar, this shapeshifter, has a tendency to go completely out of hand and just take the board over. So I really like how you were able to tone him down. I tried, and I feel like I failed. But
I think
I did not try to tone mine down. I basically just didn't want it to be CEDH level.
no, you went all ham. You went full ham.
I would not play this at a CEDH table. Orvar is fringe at best. if it's at a CADH high powered pod. But
I'm,
it's definitely on the higher end of the power level.
I want to say it's yeah, definitely fringe between the high and CEDH if we're gonna go with play EDH standards. More on that in the next video. Uh, but I do agree that it's absolutely busted once it gets going. It, you run a very fine line if we're going to talk about high power here for a second. You run this very fine line between what interaction to bring and what to keep in the deck to keep your snowball effect going. And I would imagine that you might have run into that a little bit, Jared, or no?
As in, like, I need to decide how many
Yeah,
pieces
yeah,
of
exactly,
interaction versus how
exactly.
many like ways I'm trying to include to like win cons.
Not just win cons, but I feel like even Neal had mentioned that you want to get those cards going that draw you cards, so you keep the snowball effect going, so you could find your combo and win.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that's very true. So actually a couple well, one spicy include for mine is Omen of the Sea. So that's an enchantment Theros Beyond Death. When it enters the battlefield, you scry 2, then draw a card for only 2 mana. You can pay 2 and a blue and sacrifice it to scry 2, but you're not going to do that with this deck. You could just keep targeting that enchantment to just keep drawing, scrying and drawing cards. So I thought that was pretty cool. But of course, I mean, who doesn't want to create infinite copies of Ristic Study, right? I mean, rather than having your opponents pay 1, they have to pay like 5 instances of 1. If you can draw up to 5 cards every spell they play, that's crazy. That's truly bonkers.
yeah, that's a little disgusting. I played against your heuristic studies. Not a fan. Did not like it. Don't want to repeat.
Yeah, and actually there was somebody in the game that was trying to pay for all copies of the Ristic Study. I was like, good luck.
Oh, I know. I remember that. I'm like, how are you going to pay for that? Like, I want to play Magic. I'm not just going to pay for heuristic studies. That's the point, obviously, right? But
Yeah,
just
and
they had like some very um, bad memories of past games with heuristic study and decided that that was the right course of action to go with.
well, to be honest with you, I think really more times than not, paying for the Ristic is the right decision if you're
Yes,
able to.
if
I
it's a
mean, because a lot of
single one,
people,
sure.
yeah. But sometimes it's not. I mean, it just all depends on what you need to do, what your opponents are doing. Like, it's all dependent on the situation. But, in retrospect, when I think back of times that I could have paid for Ristic Study but chose not to, I lost more games than I won out of those.
Oh, of course, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I felt, especially when the second one came out, that it got to the point where it's like, okay, I might be able to play one thing and then pay for the Ristic, but not have any mana up for interaction later on. Or God, I really need to get these two plays out, and I can't do them unless I pay 2 mana. Like it was a little too taxing when you're doing 2 mana per cast. Like,
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Um. So in terms of mana rocks, you're playing Jeweled Lotus, right?
oh, absolutely,
Oh, it's so gross to get a turn 1 Orvar, isn't it?
it's amazing. I had a good time with it.
Oh my gosh, just that turn 1 Orvar is just absolutely backbreaking.
You're just
Jeweled
like,
Lotus
oh,
is
and the
like
game's
made
over
for
now.
this deck specifically. It's absolutely made for this deck.
Oh yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
And
Um,
also, if you can afford it, City of Traders is actually really awesome for this deck too, because its text says when you play another land, sacrifice City of Traders, and so that's key. So what the Oracle text for it says is City of Traders does not trigger on lands that are put onto the battlefield without playing them. So you copy City of Traders, you just get tons of City of Traders. Like, just keep copying it over and over again. You don't have to worry. You don't have to sacrifice any of them ever. It's really sweet.
sounds really gross.
Yep, it's pretty awesome.
Oh, and there was another card that I wanted to highlight. I didn't add it to my deck yet, and maybe you guys can remind me of the name. Sorry to our viewers that I'm a bad Magic player and I don't know every card like an encyclopedia, but there is I believe it was from Battle Bonds, and it's an artifact similar to Aetherflux Reservoir that has to do with pinging players when you cast spells.
Is he talking about Sentinel Tower, maybe?
Thank you. I think that's the one. Image on the screen here in a moment, but that's one that I really am considering in the sideboard, and I might actually throw it into my deck. Just because everything in Orvar is so cheap. But that's another fun little combo line that you could go down. Being able to just continuously cast your 1 mana spells and then just start pinging everybody to death. Sounds like a good time.
Yeah, it's very similar to Flux Reservoir. You just don't gain the life. 4 mana, whenever an instant or sorcery spell is cast during your turn, Sentinel Tower deals damage to any target equal to 1 plus the number of instant sorcery spells cast before it. Yeah, so it's another good way to storm off. It's nice.
I mean, in Orvar, he's another storm. I think he's a what's the word I'm looking for? He's an unsung storm hero.
He's no Burgy, but he does pretty well.
Yeah, he's definitely not a turn 1 win. Sure, I couldn't agree more. But enough of nightmares for everybody. Turn 1 Burgies are absolutely filthy. Why don't we talk a little bit about some of the packages that are in these decks? Why don't we start with the ramp package? Neal, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with that on your end?
Yep. So ramp package was somewhat simple for this one, I guess, in the sense normal, soul rings, arcane signets. Usually, whenever I play mono blue, I also put the same card into my mono white decks as well. I play Gear Priori, allowing me to put in an additional land on each of. It actually works for everybody. You can put it on each of your turns, and then at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in their hand, they get to draw 3 cards. So, sometimes playing mono blue, you could potentially have had, have that trigger, but usually red sees that more often. But I really kind of lean on Gear Priori for the ability to put more than 1 land down, which is kind of nice because if you're not playing green, it's that's a tough thing to have. One thing that I found was really nice was Gauntlet of Power. I like this card a lot in this deck, especially because I have a few cards that allow me to target it, and I can promise you having 2 or 3 versions of Gauntlet of Power in there, all naming blue. Again, it provides that lord effect. So basically, whenever it comes into the battlefield, you choose a color. Obviously, we're going to choose blue. Creatures of the chosen color get +1/+1. So it's almost like a Grand Architect. It gives that kind of +1/+1 ability. But other than that, whenever you tap a basic land of blue, obviously you get to add 1 additional mana of that same color. So, if you have 2 or 3 of these gauntlets of power, you're starting to tap for quite a bit of mana. And this was a lot cheaper than Extraplanar Lens. I didn't have to run Snow Basics, and Extraplanar Lens is quite expensive now. So this is more of, which is kind of crazy. Gauntlet of Power is now the cheaper version to kind of get that double mana effect. And I ran stuff like Gilded Lotus as well, Thran Dynamo. This deck really wants to lean on artifacts just because you have the ability to make multiple copies, right? Some of these artifacts aren't that great. Gilded Lotus is 5, Thran Dynamo is 4. I mean, those are expensive, right? But if you can get 1, 2, 3 copies of these things, they become quite a bit more powerful, right? And Orvar can be he can kind of want that mana, especially as you get later in the game, because again, blue, and I've probably said it in previous episodes, blue is it's a tough color for me to find a win con, right? Most colors they're more focused in their win cons. I find blue to be a little bit more difficult, just in the terms of you either have to combo off, which I don't like to do, or maybe you do something like a lab maniac win, which I guess that's fun every once in a while. I do find blue lacking in win cons. I think they're lagging quite a bit from some of the other colors, but that's just my opinion. So I don't know. What did you guys run as far as ramp packages in blue?
Well, I'll go ahead and kick it off here and point out a card that I've been having an argument with Jared for quite some times over, And for me, one of the MVPs in this deck is actually Nyx Lotus. Nyx Lotus is four generic, comes to the battlefield tapped, but let's not forget this deck has a lot of untap, target permanent, instants and sorceries in it, which will then trigger Orvar and make copies of Nyx Lotus and untap the original. And let me tell you, you get a lot of devotion going in this deck very, very quickly. But that's one that I wanted to point out right away. Then I'm obviously running the Guild Lotus, like we said. I did put Jewel Lotus in mine. I love that card. Thran Dynamo, Soul Ring. I did put cards like Twiddle or Innervate. Is it Innervate or Eviscerate? One of the two. I'm sorry, guys. Which is the tap or untap target permanent, so I can target my lands, anything like that. Those I consider pseudo ramp spells in this deck. Coveted Jewel, Solemn Simulacrum. I put Cage Sun instead of Gauntlets of Power in mine. Mana Vault. I did run Skyclave Relic in mine, but I might be pulling this one out. It just doesn't feel like it does enough. I just wanted to try it. It's indestructible. I like that. So I'm not sure if the indestructible clause in this card actually warrants the 3 CMC for a 1 mana rock. But then I had Fellwar Stone and then Command Sphere. Another really, really nice one in this deck. Being able to sack it, drawing cards is always nice. But that's really my package. Kick it over to Jared. Finish us off with your high-powered ramp package.
Yeah, so like you said, Freddie, you could actually use the triple package of Clock Spinning, Mind Games of Whim of Volrath to copy your lands. So again, there's your ramp right there as long as Orvar is in play. And you could use any of the other things. I mean, you could use cards like Hydroblast to target your lands, right? Because the text says destroy target permanent if it's red. So really Hydroblast can target any permanent. So you target a land, then you just ramp yourself, with just the one spell. So you could do that, or some of the other classic rocks. You have stuff like the Arcane Signet, Fellwar Stone. I mentioned Jewel Lotus. I have Mana Crypt, Mana Vault in my build. The Sapphire Medallion is really important because reducing the buyback costs is essential when you're about to combo off. Thought Vessel is really important in mine because I focus on card draw a lot, getting copies of Omen of the Sea or other things that draw cards or put cards into my hand, that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, you could also do stuff like you could put High Tide on Isochron Scepter or just cast High Tide, and you could do cute little tricks. You could cast High Tide, crack a fetch land. You could get Mystic Sanctuary to put the High Tide back on top of your deck, draw it, cast it again. So there's different ways to do little tricks and things with my deck to, kind of ramp out of nowhere if people aren't expecting it.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot to mention the High Tide. Yeah, I run that as well. It's such a good card. So good. If you don't have a copy, guys, definitely go pick one up. Definitely pretty OP in blue. I love it. Anyways, let's move on. Let's go ahead and go check out some of the removal package that everybody's running. I know that there's not too many, but there's definitely enough to, especially with Orvar, to recur and destroy. It's great. Jared, why don't you go ahead and kick us off on this one?
Yeah, so most of my removal is in the form of counter spells. So I'm playing, probably some of the best counter spells you can get. I have, Fierce Guardianship, Force of Negation, Force of Will, Mana Drain. I'm even playing stuff like, what is it called? Muddle the Mixture, just because it also has Transmute, so you could tutor for a combo piece if you need it. Some of the stuff that's not counter spells, I like Mystic Reflection. I think that's a pretty cool one. So you could use that as a removal for somebody's commander, or you could use it on the offense if there's something that generates tokens. One of the plays that I did was I played the Phyrexian Metamorph. I had to come into play as a copy of a Grave Titan, and then with the Phyrexian Metamorph, Grave Titan triggers on the stack. you target it with Mystic Reflection, and you just get 2 additional copies of Grave Titan that make even more tokens. So I thought that was pretty cool. Cool little interaction. Of course, I have Cyclonic Rift. You could even use stuff like Twiddle as removal. I actually wound up doing that. I put a Twiddle under an Isochron Scepter, so that kept a crazy big threat tapped down for a few turns, which allowed me to stabilize and eventually win the game. So you could do cute little tricks like that as well.
Sounds like fun. I like it. Let me go ahead and talk a little bit about the ones that I put in. I know that I believe that Neal ran a counterspell that I really appreciate as well, which is the Voracious Great Shark. Neal, why don't you talk to us a little bit about that one? I know this is definitely a Neal card.
Absolutely. I love this card. It's 3 and 2 blue. It's a creature shark. And it's got flash, right? And whenever it enters the battlefield, you can counter target artifact or creature spell. And I mean, it's a 5/4, right? So, it kind of provides some, it can definitely kick some butt once it's on the battlefield, right? But it also counters those artifacts and creatures. And nowadays, there's a lot of good creatures and artifacts that you're probably going to want to counter. So I like this card a lot. And then, you can, target it as long as Orvar is out and make another copy of it. And, that having that enter the battlefield ability to counter an artifact or creature spell kind of helps. And then again, it's a 5/4. And especially in my deck, I'm able to turn all of my creatures, whether they're changelings or not, into changelings so that everything is all creature types at all times. So these Voracious Great Sharks can get mighty big. So yeah, I like this card a lot.
I think it's great with Orvar out too, having Voracious Great Shark. It's basically letting anybody know, like, hey, you play a creature or artifact, I can copy it for probably 1 or 2 mana and counter. You have an instant, a continuous counter spell on a body that is obviously susceptible to removal. Board wipes more than anything else because spot removal doesn't even do it because you could respond in.
Well, it plays into itself, right? It's a shark. It's just swimming. It's just waiting for the right time, right? So you can kind of, like you said, it's just kind of hanging out on the battlefield, and you never know what's going to happen, right?
Oh, absolutely, I love it. And I'm gonna go ahead and say that with what Jared said, I'm gonna piggyback on him and say that I added a couple of counter spells in mine for removal and or interaction. One of the big MVPs for me. I love it. It's my favorite counterspell of Magic is Mana Drain, because I love having mana on my turn for your big crazy play that I said no to. But I already had mentioned Amphium Mutineer. That one's a great card. Also with that Encore ability, it's just wonderful. Obviously, in our deck, we might not want it to ever get there because we're able to just continuously get the value from copying it. But in the event that it does get removed, we can bring it back and then copy one of those tokens that are out there, and they don't get exiled. I don't believe. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I was running Imprison in the Moon as well. I think it's one of the greatest removals packages that you could get in blue. Curse of the Swine, another great X spell with exile effect. It's amazing. And then I was running some Raven form in mine as well. I like Raven form because, believe it or not, in Orvar, you might be in a situation or a predicament where you find yourself where you need to exile one of your creatures because you can't find an answer or find the card that you need, and you need to keep digging. You can actually exile your own stuff to get copies to be able to continue searching for what you need. I just wanted to point that out. And then Meteor Golem, it's a great little MVP. Gotta love them. And Tidespout Tyrant, Sorrow of Temptation, and Agent of Treachery. Those are 3 great removal-esque slash interaction pieces in the deck to just depress the table and kind of close it off or close it out. Because once those hit the table, you definitely want to make sure that you have those cards hit the table when you're ready to exploit them on that turn. But that's really it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I only had I pretty much ran a lot of what you had. Again, my removal package was mostly in the form of creatures. Amphin Mutineer, like you said, that's such a great card. A Meteor Golem. I ran Duplicate. Again, just being able to copy that a couple times throughout the game with Orvar out is really powerful. And then one thing that was kind of fun is, since I'm running Changelings, blue is not the best at board wipes, right? So usually it's either you got to return everything to your hand, or you run something like evacuation or something along those lines. You got to wait until somebody's attacking, right? So I did Whelming Wave, which is kind of fun, right? Return all creatures to their owner's hands except for Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. Well, we're running all Changelings in my deck, so we're not returning anything. And I can promise you, when I cast this and it goes through and I have all my lords out, you're getting ready to win the game for sure with if this goes off. So it's this one plays really well into my deck. And then I ran a couple of counterspells. Obviously, counterspell. That's just the OG, right? And then I ran Sublime Epiphany. That one's kind of cool.
I love Sublime Epiphany.
Yeah.
I love that card.
Allows you to create some
So much.
tokens, and it gives you quite a few options no matter what's kind of happening on the board, which is kind of nice. I like those modal kind of cards that allow you to decide depending upon what's actually happening at that specific time. That card's really nice. And then I ran All Is Dust. That's just a classic one. If we really get into a pinch where we just have to get rid of stuff, this one makes everybody sacrifice colored permanents. So that one's really good. But that's pretty much it for removal. But most of the basic stuff that everybody else was running.
I love it. I did want to point out a janky little combo, and I hope that you could put it up on the screen. And I want to hear your thoughts on it for this deck. One card that I absolutely love from the Portal 1999 starter deck or starter set was Piracy. It's 2 blue. You may use other players' lands on your turn to cast spells, which people will respond and tap everything down, which is exactly what you want them to do. Because then you're going to go ahead and respond with a Stasis, Isochron Scepter, Dramatic Reversal. And boom, lock the game down, baby. What do y'all think?
Well, I'll tell you what Neal thinks. Neal wouldn't run that in his deck. I can promise you that.
Neal
Pretty funny, if anything.
Though
Not
it's
something I would ever expect.
Yeah, that's definitely catch me by surprise.
That's what
For
I'm
sure.
saying. I just want to see what people would imagine. Well, what would people do if you cast Piracy? They'd be like, oh, okay. Oh, you guess you don't know how to play Magic. I'm going to tap in response. Haha, I got you, boy.
Yeah, I like it. It's interesting.
And then obviously everybody would scoop there because, yeah, that would be GG. You can't play Magic anymore.
Dang. Wow.
Obviously, the chances of actually pulling that off are kind of hard, for slim to none. But moving on. Any of y'all have any of the tutor packages in your decks that you wanted to highlight or talk about?
I didn't have anything again because I definitely tried to keep mine somewhat fair.
It's fair to run a couple of tutors.
No, it is. No, hey, people running tutors, that's perfectly fine. I just didn't think I needed to. I kind of made up mine with card draw, basically. More cards you draw, the more likely you're going to grab what you need.
Well, I'm already going to call it right now. Mr. Jared is probably running Mystical Tutor and Merchant Scroll in that deck, along with, you already said Muddle to make sure, and maybe Fabricate as well.
Yeah, I'm not running Merchant Scroll. I'm running instead things like Dizzy Spell, so you could transmute that again, so you could transmute that for Whim of Volrath. I am running Mystical Tutor. Again, I mentioned Muddle the Mixture. Again, that's another one with transmute that you could use to tutor up something. I'm also running. Oh, I guess I am running Merchant Scroll. Sorry, that's a sorcerer. I was looking at instance. Let's
Yeah,
see. I'm running Spellseeker. Spellseeker is really important because you can copy it with Orvar, so you could actually use it to tutor for multiple pieces as long as it sticks around.
are you
So that's a
running
pretty
Snappy
important
in
one too.
your build as well? Good old Snappy.
Snapcaster Mage. Yeah, that's more of Recursion though. It's not really a tutor, but it's
Oh,
really
of course,
good.
but I was just curious if you were running it as well. I love Snappy.
Yeah, Snapcaster is really good in this deck because we can copy it with Orvar again, so you can keep recurring things if you have more stuff in your graveyard.
Yeah, Torrential Gearhulk also is a great card for recursion. I'm sorry. Let's keep going on the tutor package. I apologize.
I didn't really have anything else to say for tutors. That's pretty much it.
Okay, great. Let's go to recursion.
Yep. So we covered a lot of decent stuff on recursion. I did want to again emphasize Mystic Sanctuary. So you play those fetch lands, and then as long as you have 3 or more other islands, you can get instant or sorceries back to the top of your deck, which is pretty awesome. It's very good, and then you can copy it with Orvar, so you can continue getting instants and sorceries to the top of your top of your deck. So it's similar to Snapcaster Mage. Pretty fun.
I guess Orvar is kind of like the song that never ends. It goes on and on, my friends. Right? Just vicious loops that you just happen to stumble into. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, I'm running some kind of mean stuff in my deck too. Like I have Narset and Hull Breacher, along with Echo of Aeons, so
Well,
and
yeah,
Windfall. So of course I have those in this deck too.
I got Narset in my deck. You gotta run a Narset. Narset in mono blue. You just have to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
Narset's really good.
I am a huge fan of Teferi in this deck as well, the new one, Master of Time. Being able to use his abilities to rummage through your deck. Or,
Yeah. Of course, I have Archaeomancer and Shipwrecked Dowser in here too. Those are really good recursions because again they're permanents, so you can keep copying them to get things back. And Archaeomancer can actually loop with stuff too. So if you have enough mana, you can just continuously loop it and get things back. This is another way to go infinite.
would you consider running something like Brain Freeze in this build, or do you?
I feel like if you're already looping something infinitely, you're already going to kind of win in another way. So Brain Freeze just feels like, extra overkill that you don't necessarily need to win the game. That's just my opinion. So I don't run it.
I agree. I could appreciate that. I was just imagining if it would be a good, I don't know, secondary win con or third win con in the deck, just to make sure that you guarantee that win. If you want to power up the deck, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Brain Freeze is something you could consider based on your meta, sure.
What I love also is Chain of Vapors in this deck. Great. Especially if you're doing a Chain of Vapors Brain Freeze combo, you can actually target your stuff to get and continuously recast it while also casting things to copy your lands as you're sacking them. You're creating copies and looping it. Wow, see, you could just find so many combos. It's unreal. I need to stop, but I think we've covered everything that we needed to cover on the deck, guys. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, everybody, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for being patient with us in the past couple of weeks that we have been missing. We will do our best to be back next week with a brand new Brew the Meta. And until then, everybody have a wonderful evening. And thanks for tuning in. Please make sure to follow, like, and subscribe. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.